Sunday afternoon arrived crisp and clear, with golden autumn light filtering through the trees as Sarah drove up the winding mountain road to the Sullivan property. The log house came into view gradually, nestled among towering pines and surrounded by gardens that showed signs of careful planning and abundant harvest. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the sounds of children's laughter carried through the mountain air. Marcus met her at the front door, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel and wearing an apron that read, "World's Best Dad," in fading letters. "Welcome to organized chaos," he said with a grin that put Sarah immediately at ease. "The kids have been cooking all morning, and I think we might actually have enough food for a small army." The interior of the house surprised Sarah with its warmth and functionality. The main living area was open and spacious, with comfortable furniture arranged to accommodate large group conversations and individual reading nooks. Books filled built-in shelves, children's artwork covered the refrigerator, and family photographs documented years of camping trips, holidays, and everyday moments. 9 children ranging from 6 to 16 moved through the kitchen and dining areas with purposeful energy. Each had assigned tasks, from setting the large farmhouse table to stirring pots on the stove to arranging freshly picked flowers in mason jar centerpieces. The coordination was impressive without feeling rigid or joyless. Miss Mitchell called 12-year-old Sophie, rushing over with floury hands and a bright smile. "We made fresh bread and apple butter from our own apples, and David grew the biggest pumpkin in the county for our pie." The girls' enthusiasm was infectious, and Sarah found herself drawn into the kitchen to admire the impressive array of homemade dishes. Marcus's children introduced themselves properly, something Sarah realized they had been taught to do when meeting adults. 10-year-old Alex was shy but proud to show off the carved wooden napkin rings he had made in his father's workshop. 8-year-old Lily had helped prepare a salad with vegetables from their garden and insisted on explaining the nutritional benefits of each ingredient with scientific precision that made Sarah smile. The youngest, 6-year-old Thomas, attached himself to Sarah's side immediately. "Pa says you help kids learn to read better," he said, looking up at her with serious brown eyes. "I'm learning to read chapter books now. Want to see my favorite?" Before Sarah could answer, he was tugging her toward a bookshelf filled with age-appropriate selections. Dinner was served family-style around the large table, with Marcus at one end and Sarah given the place of honor at the other end. The food was simple but delicious, clearly prepared with love and attention to detail. Conversation flowed naturally, with each child sharing highlights from their week and asking Sarah questions about her own experiences and interests. "Do you like living in the mountains, Miss Mitchell?" asked 15-year-old Grace, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes. "We've lived here our whole lives, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like in a big city." The question sparked a discussion about different environments and lifestyle choices, with the children listening thoughtfully to Sarah's descriptions of city life and college experiences. Marcus guided the conversation skillfully, ensuring everyone had opportunities to participate while keeping the discussion appropriate for all age levels. When 7-year-old Ben started to monopolize the conversation with detailed descriptions of his rock collection, Marcus gently redirected him while validating his interests. The balance between structure and freedom impressed Sarah, who had observed many families struggle with mealtime dynamics. After dinner, the children efficiently cleared the table and began washing dishes in an assembly line system that had clearly been perfected through practice. The older children supervised the younger ones, while Marcus and Sarah moved to the living room with cups of coffee and slices of the famous county champion pumpkin pie. "Your children are remarkable," Sarah said, watching through the kitchen doorway as the cleanup proceeded without arguments or complaints. "The way they work together and support each other is really special. You should be very proud of the family culture you've created." Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking at his children with an expression of deep love mixed with something that might have been concern. "It wasn't always this smooth," he admitted. "After Rebecca died, there were months when I thought I was failing them completely. 9 children grieving their mother, and me trying to figure out how to be both parents at once. There were plenty of burned dinners, forgotten school projects, and nights when I wondered if I was destroying their lives." Sarah felt her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. How did you manage? She asked quietly. I can't imagine the strength that must have required. Honestly, the kids saved us all, Marcus replied, his voice soft with memory. They started taking care of each other in ways that humbled me. Jake stepped up to help with homework supervision. Grace became a second mother to the little ones. Even Thomas, who was barely 2 when Rebecca died, seemed to understand that we all needed to be gentle with each other. The conversation continued as darkness fell outside, and the children finished their chores. Several of the younger ones brought books to the living room, creating a peaceful reading time that included Sarah naturally. She found herself helping 8-year-old David sound out difficult words while 10-year-old Alex shared interesting facts from his nature encyclopedia. As the evening progressed, Sarah realized she felt more relaxed and content than she had in years. The Sullivan house buzzed with life and laughter, but it wasn't the overwhelming chaos she had expected from a large family. Instead, there was a rhythm and flow that spoke to strong foundations and genuine affection between family members. Marcus walked her to her car when the evening finally wound down, with 9 children calling goodbyes from the front porch. The mountain air was crisp and filled with the scent of wood smoke and approaching winter. Stars were beginning to appear in the clear sky, brilliant in the absence of city lights. Thank you for coming, Marcus said, his breath visible in the cool air. The kids haven't stopped talking about having you over since I mentioned it. You're a natural with them, and they respond to your genuine interest in their thoughts and ideas. Sarah felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. Thank you for including me, she replied. Your family is extraordinary, Marcus. The love and respect you've built together is really beautiful to witness. They stood quietly for a moment, neither seeming eager to end the evening. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice careful but determined. Sarah, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I'd like to ask you something. Would you be interested in spending more time with us? Not just dinners, but maybe helping with homework sometimes, or joining us for weekend activities. The kids adore you, and honestly, it's been wonderful to have adult conversation and support. Sarah's heart began beating faster. I'd love that, she said, surprising herself with how quickly the words came. I really enjoyed this evening, and your children are delightful company. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself becoming a regular presence in the Sullivan household. She helped with homework on Tuesday evenings, joined them for Saturday morning hikes, and shared Sunday dinners that became the highlight of her week. The children treated her with affection, but not the desperate neediness she had worried might develop. Instead, they seemed to appreciate her individual attention while maintaining their strong bonds with each other and their father. Marcus's approach to relationships was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. He never asked intrusive questions about her past or made her feel like she needed to explain her circumstances. Instead, he seemed interested in who she was in the present moment, valuing her thoughts, opinions, and contributions to his family's daily life. The change in Sarah's own perspective was gradual but profound. For years, she had defined herself by what she couldn't do, couldn't have, couldn't be. Living with the label of Barren had convinced her that she was incomplete as a woman and unsuitable as a partner. But in the Sullivan household, she was valued for her teaching skills, her kindness with children, her ability to listen and offer thoughtful advice. One evening in late November, as Sarah helped Grace with a challenging literature assignment while Marcus supervised younger children's bath time, she realized something had shifted fundamentally in her understanding of family and belonging. She wasn't trying to replace these children's mother or desperately clinging to them to fill an emotional void. Instead, she had found a place where her natural gifts were appreciated and where she could contribute meaningfully to something larger than herself. The conversation that changed everything happened on a snowy December evening after the children had gone to bed. Marcus had built a fire in the stone fireplace, and he and Sarah were planning the Christmas activities the family traditionally enjoyed. The house was quiet except for the crackling logs and the occasional sound of wind in the pines outside. Sarah, Marcus said, setting down his coffee cup and turning to face her fully. I need to tell you something, and I hope you'll hear me out completely before you respond. Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervousness, but She nodded for him to continue. Over these past few months, you've become essential to our family in ways I didn't expect, Marcus said, his voice steady but intense. The children love you, but more than that, you've helped us all heal from wounds we didn't even know we still carried. You've brought laughter back to this house, and patience, and a kind of gentle wisdom that we've needed desperately. He paused, running his hands through his hair in a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was gathering courage for something difficult. I've fallen in love with you, Sarah, he continued quietly. Not because I need someone to help with the children, and not because I'm looking for a replacement for Rebecca. I love you for who you are, for the way you see beauty in complicated situations, for your strength in rebuilding your life, for the genuine care you show my children without trying to change them or us. Sarah felt tears starting to form as Marcus kept talking. I know your history, he said gently. I know what you've been through, what you've been told about yourself, what people in your previous life made you believe about your worth. But here's what I see. A woman who has so much love to give that 9 children who barely knew you have flourished under your attention. A woman whose capacity for nurturing isn't limited by biology, but expanded by choice and commitment. Marcus moved closer to Sarah on the couch, taking her hands in his work-roughened ones. I've got 9 kids, Sarah, he said with a smile that transformed his entire face. 9 children who need a mother figure, who are desperate for the kind of gentle guidance and unconditional love you've already started giving them. They don't care about medical diagnoses or fertility statistics. They just know that you make their lives better, safer, happier. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't the bitter tears she had shed so often in Cedar Ridge. These were tears of relief, of recognition, of coming home to herself. Come home with us, Sarah, Marcus said softly. Not as a consolation prize or a second choice, but as the woman I love, the mother my children need, the partner I want to build a life with. Let me prove to you that family isn't about biology or traditional expectations. It's about choice, commitment, and love that grows stronger because it's chosen rather than assumed. Sarah looked into Marcus's eyes and saw no pity, no reservations, no hidden agenda. She saw a man who understood that love came in many forms, that families could be built through intention and dedication rather than just genetics, that her worth wasn't determined by her ability to conceive children, but by her capacity to love the children already in the world who needed her. Yes, she whispered, and then, more strongly, yes, I want to come home with you. I want to build a life with you and your incredible children. I want to be their mother. Not because I can't have biological children, but because I can't imagine loving any children more than I already love them. As Marcus kissed her softly in the firelight, Sarah felt the last vestiges of the Barren label fall away completely. She wasn't incomplete or broken or settling for less than she deserved. She was exactly where she belonged, with a man who valued her for everything she was, and children who had chosen her as much as she had chosen them. The wedding took place the following spring in the meadow behind the Sullivan house, with all 9 children participating in the ceremony. Sarah wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers picked by her new daughters. As she repeated her vows surrounded by the family she had found when she stopped believing she was defined by what she couldn't do, Sarah understood that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as rejections, and that love multiplies rather than divides when it's built on choice rather than obligation. Sarah's move to Millbrook happened faster than she had expected. Dr. Wells helped her secure the high school position within 2 weeks, and by early July, she was loading her belongings into a rental truck with help from her neighbor's teenage son. The drive to her new home took 3 hours through winding mountain passes, each mile putting distance between her and the whispered conversations that had defined her existence in Cedar Ridge. Millbrook was larger than Cedar Ridge, but still small enough that newcomers attracted attention. The town sat in a valley surrounded by dense forests and rushing streams, with a main street lined with family-owned businesses and a public library that made Sarah's heart skip with its extensive collection. Her rental house was a small craftsman bungalow with a front porch and a yard that needed attention, but it felt like a fresh start rather than another reminder of failed dreams. The high school where she would work served students from several rural communities scattered throughout the mountain region. Many came from farming families, logging families, and families who had lived in the area for generations. During her orientation meeting with Principal Rodriguez, Sarah learned that many students struggled with reading comprehension and would benefit from individual attention she was qualified to provide. "We've been trying to fill this position for 2 years," Principal Rodriguez explained as he showed her the reading resource room. "Teachers here wear many hats, and the previous reading specialist retired without replacement. Your experience with elementary students will translate well to high schoolers who need foundational support." The room was bright and welcoming, with comfortable seating areas and walls lined with books of varying difficulty levels. Sarah's first month in Millbrook passed quietly. She spent time preparing lesson plans, exploring hiking trails near her house, and shopping at the local farmers market on Saturday mornings. People were friendly but not intrusive, offering waves and brief conversations without prying into her background or personal circumstances. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she could breathe without constantly bracing for painful questions or awkward silences. The town's annual Harvest Festival arrived in late July, and Sarah decided to attend despite her usual reluctance to participate in community events. The festival took place in the town park, with local vendors selling produce, crafts, and homemade goods. Live music played on a small stage, and families spread blankets on the grass to enjoy picnic dinners while children ran between the booths. Sarah was examining handmade pottery at one vendor's table when she heard a commotion near the main stage. A group of children had gathered around a tall man with weathered hands and a gentle voice who was telling stories about wildlife in the surrounding forests. The children listened with rapt attention as he described encounters with bears, eagles, and mountain lions, his hands moving expressively to illustrate each tale. "That's Marcus Sullivan," the pottery vendor told Sarah when she asked about the storyteller. "Lives up on Sullivan Mountain with his 9 children. Lost his wife about 5 years ago, but he's doing a remarkable job raising those kids on his own. They're some of the best-behaved children in town." The vendor's voice carried obvious admiration and respect. Sarah found herself drawn to watch Marcus interact with the children gathered around him. He treated each child with individual attention, remembering names and asking about school projects or family pets. When a shy little girl dropped her ice cream, Marcus produced a clean handkerchief and helped her clean up without making her feel embarrassed. His patience and kindness were evident in every gesture. After his storytelling session ended, Marcus began collecting his children from various activities around the festival. Sarah watched as 9 kids ranging in age from about 6 to 16 gathered around him like planets orbiting the sun. They chatted excitedly about their festival experiences, showing him crafts they had made and treats they had purchased with carefully budgeted allowance money. The family dynamic fascinated Sarah. The older children naturally helped with the younger ones, but it didn't feel forced or resentful. Marcus treated them as individuals while maintaining clear authority and structure. When one of the middle children complained about sharing cotton candy with a sibling, Marcus quietly reminded him about family kindness without shaming or lecturing. The correction was gentle but effective. Sarah learned more about the Sullivan family over the following weeks. Marcus ran a small construction business that specialized in log cabin building and restoration. He employed 2 other men from town and had built a reputation for quality craftsmanship and fair pricing. The family lived in a large log house that Marcus had built himself on 100 acres of inherited mountain land. The 9 children attended various schools depending on their ages. The 3 oldest were in high school and would be Sarah's students when school resumed in August. The middle children attended the elementary school in town, and the youngest was starting kindergarten. According to local conversations Sarah overheard at the coffee shop, Marcus managed their schedules, activities, and household with impressive organization. "He's got those kids trained like a well-oiled machine," she heard the coffee shop owner tell a customer. "Every one of them has chores appropriate for their age, but they still get to be kids. You should see them at the lake on summer weekends, just having fun like any normal family. Marcus makes it look easy, but I can't imagine the work involved in raising 9 children alone." Sarah's curiosity about the Sullivan family grew, but she maintained her distance. Her experience with Thomas and his family had taught her to be cautious about situations involving children. She didn't want to project her own desires onto Marcus or his family, and she certainly didn't want to create awkward situations based on her own emotional needs. School began in late August, and Sarah threw herself into her new role with enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years. The high school students were different from the elementary children she was used to teaching, but many struggled with reading skills that should have been mastered years earlier. Sarah developed individualized plans for each student, working with teenagers who had been written off by previous teachers as lazy or learning disabled. 3 of Marcus Sullivan's children were among her students. 16-year-old Jake was quiet and serious, reading well above grade level but struggling with writing assignments. 14-year-old Emma was dyslexic and had developed sophisticated coping strategies to hide her reading difficulties. 13-year-old Michael loved adventure stories but had trouble with comprehension when reading silently. Working with the Sullivan children gave Sarah insights into their family life. They were respectful, hardworking, and supportive of each other in ways that impressed their teachers. When Emma struggled with a particularly difficult passage during one session, Jake quietly offered encouragement without taking over the task. Michael shared books he thought Jake would enjoy, and Jake recommended stories that might help Emma build confidence. "Your father has done an amazing job with you 3, Sarah told them during a particularly productive session. The children exchanged glances before Jake responded. "Pa says we're a team, and teams look out for each other. He works hard for us, so we work hard too." The simple statement carried weight that spoke to strong family values and mutual respect. Sarah began encountering Marcus around town more frequently as autumn arrived. He would nod politely when they passed on the street, and occasionally they would find themselves in line at the grocery store or the post office. Their conversations were brief and centered on his children's progress in school, but Sarah noticed his genuine interest in their education and his gratitude for her individual attention to their specific needs. One afternoon in October, Sarah was hiking a trail near the lake when she encountered the entire Sullivan family on what appeared to be a nature photography expedition. The children were spread out along the trail with disposable cameras, documenting fall foliage and wildlife signs under Marcus's patient supervision. He was teaching them about composition and lighting while keeping track of 9 active children in wilderness terrain. "Miss Mitchell," called Emma when she spotted Sarah approaching on the trail. "Look at this mushroom I found. Pa says it's called a honey mushroom, and it's safe to touch, but not to eat." The girls' excitement was infectious, and soon several of the other children were showing Sarah their photographic discoveries. Marcus approached with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "They're working on a science project about seasonal changes in forest ecosystems," he explained. Nothing like hands-on learning to make concepts stick. His pride in his children's curiosity and engagement was obvious, and Sarah found herself drawn into conversations about educational approaches and child development. The afternoon stretched longer than anyone had planned as the children discovered a beaver dam and signs of recent bear activity. Marcus shared his extensive knowledge of local wildlife while maintaining constant awareness of his children's safety and whereabouts. Sarah was impressed by his ability to be both educator and protector, creating learning opportunities while managing the complex logistics of supervising 9 children in wilderness terrain. As the sun began to set, Marcus suggested that Sarah join them for the walk back to their vehicles. The trail was easier to navigate in a group, and the children enjoyed having an audience for their nature discoveries. Sarah found herself walking beside Marcus while the children ranged ahead and behind them on the wide trail, chattering about their photographs and planning their science project presentations. "You've made a real difference for my 3 in your reading program," Marcus said as they walked. "Jake is writing stories now instead of just reading them. Emma is starting to believe she's smart despite her dyslexia. Michael is reading chapter books he never would have attempted before. I can't thank you enough for seeing their potential instead of their problems." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "They're wonderful students," she replied. "All 3 of them are bright and motivated. Sometimes kids just need someone to believe in them and provide the right kind of support. You've raised them to be confident learners, which makes my job much easier." The conversation continued naturally as they walked, covering topics from education philosophy to parenting challenges, to the beauty of the changing seasons. Sarah was struck by Marcus's thoughtfulness and his genuine interest in her opinions and experiences. He listened without trying to solve problems or offer unsolicited advice, something she had rarely experienced in conversations with men. When they reached the parking area where Sarah had left her car, Marcus hesitated before speaking. "Would you be interested in joining us for dinner Sunday afternoon?" he asked. "The kids are cooking a harvest meal with vegetables from our garden, and they've been asking if they could invite their favorite teacher. Nothing fancy, just family dinner with maybe one extra place setting." Sarah's first instinct was to decline. Spending time with a large family felt like it might be emotionally difficult, given her own losses and longings. But something in Marcus's expression, the genuine warmth and lack of pity, made her reconsider. "I'd like that very much," she heard herself saying. "Can I bring something to contribute?" "Just yourself," Marcus replied with that transformative smile. "The kids are handling everything, and they're very proud of their cooking skills. Fair warning, though, dinner conversation with 9 children can be quite an adventure. Hope you're prepared for some enthusiastic storytelling and probably a few spilled drinks." As Sarah drove home that evening, she realized she was looking forward to Sunday dinner with anticipation rather than anxiety. For the first time since her divorce, she had been invited somewhere not out of pity or obligation, but because someone genuinely wanted her company. The Sullivan family had somehow made her feel welcome without treating her as broken or incomplete, and that feeling was both unfamiliar and deeply gratifying. Sarah Mitchell stood at her kitchen window, watching the morning mist roll across the valley below. At 32, she had grown used to the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. The words followed her everywhere in their small mountain town of Cedar Ridge. Barren, childless, incomplete. Her marriage to Thomas had ended 6 months ago, not with shouting or anger, but with quiet resignation. "I need a family, Sarah," he had said, his voice barely above a whisper as he packed his belongings. "My mother keeps asking about grandchildren, and I just can't keep making excuses." The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone in town knew the real reason. Sarah had tried everything. Doctors in the city had run countless tests, prescribed medications that made her sick, and suggested procedures that drained their savings account. The fertility specialist in Denver had delivered the final verdict with clinical detachment. "Your chances of conceiving naturally are less than 2%, he had said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed her chart. "We could discuss more aggressive treatments, but given your age and test results, I wouldn't recommend getting your hopes up." The rejection wasn't just from Thomas. His family had made their feelings clear long before the divorce. "Maybe if you ate better," his mother had suggested during one particularly uncomfortable Sunday dinner. "My grandmother always said women who can't bear children aren't eating enough red meat." His sister would bring her 3 young children to every family gathering, making sure they called Thomas Uncle Tommy, while pointedly ignoring Sarah's attempts to connect with them. Even her own family had grown distant. Her younger sister Emma had 2 children and was pregnant with her 3rd. Their mother couldn't hide her disappointment during phone calls. "Maybe you should consider adoption," she would say. "There are so many children who need homes." But Sarah had wanted to experience pregnancy, to feel a child growing inside her, to give birth to someone who shared her DNA. The suggestion felt like another reminder of her failure as a woman. The small mountain community where she had grown up felt increasingly hostile. Women her age would cross the street to avoid conversations that might become awkward. The local grocery store checkout clerk, Mrs. Henderson, had stopped asking about her family plans after the divorce became public knowledge. Even her job at the local elementary school had become a source of pain. She loved working as a reading specialist, but watching other people's children learn and grow reminded her daily of what she couldn't have. Dr. Patricia Wells, the school principal, had been one of the few people who didn't treat Sarah differently after the divorce. "You're one of our best teachers," she had said during Sarah's annual review. "The children respond to you in ways I've rarely seen. You have a natural gift for connecting with them." But even Dr. Wells' kindness couldn't ease the ache Sarah felt when the school day ended, and she returned to her empty house. The house itself had become a monument to failed dreams. The spare bedroom still held the rocking chair Thomas had bought during their 2nd year of marriage, optimistically placed next to a window where Sarah had imagined nursing a baby while watching the sunrise. The attic contained boxes of baby clothes she had collected over the years, tiny outfits in gender-neutral colors that had never been worn. She had stopped going up there after the divorce, unable to face the physical evidence of her hopes. Financial pressure added another layer of stress to her situation. The medical bills from years of fertility treatments had accumulated despite their health insurance. Thomas had been responsible for half of the debt, but after the divorce, Sarah found herself struggling to make the minimum payments on credit cards maxed out from procedures that had yielded nothing but disappointment and side effects. Her teaching salary, while adequate for a couple, barely covered the mortgage payments on their house. She had considered selling and moving to a smaller apartment, but the real estate market in Cedar Ridge moved slowly, and she couldn't afford to take a significant loss. The house represented the last connection to the life she had planned, and letting go felt like admitting total defeat. Dating seemed impossible in a town where everyone knew her history. The few single men in Cedar Ridge were either much older widowers looking for companionship or younger men who wanted to start families. Sarah couldn't bear the thought of explaining her medical situation to someone new, of watching another person's face change from interest to pity to polite distance. She had tried online dating, creating profiles on apps that connected her with men in Denver and Colorado Springs. Several promising conversations had developed over weeks of messaging, but when the topic of family plans inevitably arose, Sarah found herself either lying about her situation or explaining the truth, and watching potential relationships end before they truly began. The isolation deepened during holidays and community events. Cedar Ridge prided itself on being family-friendly, organizing festivals and celebrations that centered around children. The annual Pumpkin Festival featured a costume contest for kids, pony rides, and family photos with the mayor. Sarah had attended every year since childhood, but now she felt like an outsider watching other people live the life she had wanted. Church had become another source of pain rather than comfort. Pastor Williams meant well, but his sermons often focused on families and God's plan for parents. The congregation included many young couples with babies, and Sarah found herself sitting alone in pews surrounded by the sounds of infant coos and toddler chatter. Several well-meaning parishioners had suggested she pray harder or examine her heart for sins that might be preventing God from blessing her with children. Work provided some refuge, but even there, challenges arose. Parent-teacher conferences reminded Sarah of her outsider status. Mothers would sometimes make comments about not understanding how challenging parenting could be unless you had children of your own. "You're so lucky you can go home to peace and quiet," one father had said after discussing his son's reading difficulties. "We never get a moment's rest with 3 kids." Sarah had smiled and nodded, not mentioning that her quiet house felt more like a tomb than a blessing. The medical appointments had stopped after the divorce, but the physical reminders of her fertility issues remained. Painful monthly cycles served as regular reminders of her body's failure to function as she desperately wanted it to. Friends would complain about cramps or mood swings, not realizing that Sarah would have welcomed any sign that her reproductive system was working normally. Social media had become a minefield of pregnancy announcements, baby photos, and family milestones. Sarah found herself alternating between compulsively checking updates from high school classmates and friends, and deactivating her accounts for weeks at a time when the constant evidence of other people's happiness became too overwhelming to process. Sleep often eluded her, especially during the quiet hours between midnight and dawn when the house settled around her, and the silence became deafening. She would lie awake thinking about the children she would never have, imagining their faces, their voices, their personalities. Sometimes she would dream about pregnancy and wake up with her hands on her flat stomach, experiencing a few seconds of hope before reality crashed back. The mountains that surrounded Cedar Ridge had always been a source of comfort, but even they seemed to mock her now. The endless cycle of seasons, the way nature renewed itself each spring, the abundance of wildlife raising young in the forests around town, all served as reminders of fertility and life continuing around her while she remained stuck in a cycle of loss and longing. Local businesses had grown used to Sarah's solitary presence. She shopped alone, ate alone at the diner on weekends, and attended community events by herself. The owner of Mountain Books, Mr. Peterson, had started ordering romance novels specifically for Sarah, understanding without being told that she needed escapes into fictional worlds where love conquered all obstacles and happy endings were guaranteed. Her car had become a sanctuary where she could cry without judgment. After particularly difficult days at school or awkward encounters in town, Sarah would drive the winding mountain roads, pulling over at scenic overlooks to let her emotions pour out. The vast wilderness absorbed her sobs and anger, offering the kind of acceptance she couldn't find among people who thought they understood her pain but truly had no idea. The upcoming summer break from school loomed ahead of her like an empty expanse of time she didn't know how to fill. Previous summers had been spent on vacation with Thomas, visiting his family, or taking trips to national parks. Now she faced 3 months of isolation, with only her books and the mountains for company, while families around town made plans for camping trips, beach vacations, and visits to grandparents. As Sarah stood at her kitchen window that morning, watching a deer and her fawn cross the meadow behind her house, she made a decision that surprised her with its clarity. She would take the teaching job that Dr. Wells had mentioned in the next town over, Millbrook, where a high school needed a reading specialist. It paid better, offered health insurance that might cover therapy, and, most importantly, provided an escape from Cedar Ridge and all the painful memories embedded in every street corner and familiar face. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. Starting over at 32 seemed daunting, but continuing to live as the town's symbol of failed womanhood felt impossible. She had no idea what waited for her in Millbrook, but it had to be better than spending another year surrounded by people who saw her as incomplete, damaged, or deserving of pity rather than respect and companionship.